But I also found these. Now these I purchased from eBay. I did not do this. It's horrific. It really is. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. It shows you just what's happening to these. I can't believe someone would break the board up like this. What's wrong with the sockets? These sockets were good sockets as well. Well, alright, they're single white, but still, what a nightmare. Even cut the connector in two there, look, there's not even a full length. But nevertheless, I will reclaim these connectors anyway. What I'm going to do now is spend a few minutes and just take off all the DRAM chips. I'll take off these 7.4 series chips as well here, they're useful. And these connectors, I think 3 of them look okay. Is that one chopped down? That one might be a bit short as well, actually. No, that one's full length. I think they've got 2 full length ones there, but they're good condition, they're gold plated, they're in good condition. Chances are on these, some of these boards might have majority of the RAM chips faulty, and others might just have the odd one. So it's always useful, and that's why I bought these. I saw these at £1 each or something. I thought, oh, I'm going to have to buy those. I feel sorry for them, you know. Let's reclaim the chips at least. Yeah, it makes me sick. It makes me sick that someone would do that to these motherboards, actually. So I removed all the RAM chips from the first board. I'll show you some of that work in a minute on the other 3. So how many chips do you think were faulty on that first board? Do you think it was less than 8, more than 8? I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about it. None whatsoever. All the chips I've taken off here, I've cleaned up the pins, straightened them up. I'll show you some of that work as well, you know, straighten them up with the pliers there. There's still probably little bits of solder on the pins here, you know, if I show you one of these fairly close. You know, you can see that there's little bits of solder on, but they're nice and straight. None of them are broken or anything like that. So I tested these out on the 2000 board there with the Logica. Just removed one of the chips that I've got socketed, and went through all the tests there with the address test and everything. Every one of those works perfectly, not a problem. So these sharp ones are pretty good. These are marked LH21256-12, so they're 120 nanoseconds. These. Let's see if I can see when they're manufactured. Yeah, they were manufactured in the 46th week of 1988, so pretty early, actually. But yeah, every one of those worked okay. It's got me wondering if this was off a Rev 3 board, not a Rev 5 board, actually. It could have been. I'm not sure whether you can tell from the bottom. But yeah, I will spend some time later I might not take all these off, but I might take a good, I don't know, 10 or so of these off. I mean, if I can be bothered, I'll try and take them all off. They're a pain to desolder because each one of them's got, you know, one side's on the ground, one side's on the VCC. But nevertheless, these are useful just if you want one in the exact package, you know, the same style. Because I've had to replace these a few times in the past and ended up with like a little disc type one or something. It's a pain trying to get one that looks just like that. The other thing I will do, as I mentioned earlier, is I'll remove these expansion connectors as well, but I'll put that in the pile to look at later. Now you can see the board's pretty warped there. That's probably from the hot air. So yeah, using a lot of hot air to remove all these on a working board, you've got to be super careful. I probably wouldn't use hot air, just in case you've got one that you can't free up. What I ended up doing is like half of them I desoldered the solder and then just used the hot air to free it up. But by the time I got to the ones up here, you can see there's still lots of solder there. I just used the soldering iron to straighten up the pin, left the solder in place. Well, actually I didn't actually. I used the solder sucker but left most of the solder in place and then used the hot air. And they came off super easy, but yeah, the board is a bit warped. I don't know whether it was warped before or not. So which one do we do next? I'm tempted to go for these super dark looking chips here. They're all the same make actually. They're all Siemens, these ones. Yeah, I'll do that one next. So I'll show you a little bit of this. The main issue with this is the pins are bent over. You know, it's like they're bent outwards, so you've got to straighten them out. This is the blooming problem. You know, you heat for a second or two and then you can straighten. You don't necessarily need to remove all the solder if you're freed up with hot air, like I am. But the main thing is you do need to straighten them out. You see that when I get the solder off there, On this side it can look unblocked, those don't, there's only one or two there that have unblocked properly, but on this side the solder's all still there again. They're really difficult to deal with these. I always hated working on these 500 boards with the RAM here in particular for that very reason. But you know, you can, if you take time and you allow temperature to go through, you can remove them just with a desolder station like this. It's all about, you know, like these pins here that need a bit more time. You can see that the solder came out really well there on that one, but the other ones, yeah, not very well unblocked at all. There's one or two that's still got lots of solder there. So I've started to remove some of the solder off these chips, and I've taken off a couple of resistor packs there, but I've just desoldered this here, and I'm just doing a bit of this here. You know, I had to do a bit of this just to try and free it up. So let's see if we can work out which ones are not moving. We're almost there though. It's like the more I do that, the more I wobble that, the more free it becomes. Bear in mind, we don't want to reuse this board, so we're not bothered about damaging the board. You know, you could just do a bit of that and a bit of that, but what I don't want to do is bend the pins. I mean, it's a bit dirty, this. There's a little green bit and stuff on there, but you know what? This is better than some of the ones on some of the boards I've got here. I've got a 500 plus that you saw me repair in a previous video there. The pins on that, they're kind of there's not even got any gold plating left on them. Whoever previously cleaned up that board went to town on the connector for sure. Yeah, there we go, that came off a lot easier than expected. What I ended up doing was just levering like this, you know, under the PCB just a little bit all the way along. Repeat that several times until it's lifted off. So I've not distorted it or bent it or whatever, but you can see just on the tips they're a little bit green, but most of the gold plating is still on there, and obviously there's some dirt or flux or something there, and this needs cleaning up, but I'll get the toothbrush onto that afterwards, and that's a good spare now. Can you see that ripple there? That's what happens when you start to delaminate the board. But as it cools down, it goes back to normal. I've had one or two of those like that where it's rippled, the board's rippled up, but then it goes back to normal after it's cooled down. But that's why, you know, if this was on a proper board, not just a piece of a board, I'd spend some time preheating the whole area, maybe, I don't know, at 150, 200 degrees for 3 or 4 minutes before I start cranking up to, you know, 350, 400-ish. Preheating the extended area just helps avoid that, where you could risk delaminating the PCB, but yeah, these are junk boards anyway, these little bits. You can see it's free on that side, stuck down here somewhere I think. Sorry, I'm pulling a bit too hard there. Yeah, so still stuck down here. No surprise, that's the ground, I think. There we go. Put that onto the mat and do the next one. So the nice thing with these Siemens ones on this first board I've looked at, well, second board I've looked at here, is one side of the pins are totally straight, so you don't need to bend them, you know, straighten them up from the underside of the board first. The other ones are folded over. You can see these are the ones that were folded over a little bit actually, and perhaps still were before I heated up and pulled them off. I must have missed that side of that chip. But yeah, I'll straighten them up this way. Make sure you don't get that way, because this has got a cutting thing, so if you got too near there you could start cutting the tips of the pins off. But yeah, I'll straighten up that way and then inspect side on, make sure all the pins are straight there, which most of them are. We've just got a little kink here. Can you see these pins are kind of kinked down a little bit, you know, twisted down just ever so slightly, probably because of the way it came out with the hot air. That's one problem you can have as you heat in and pull in. If you pull in at a slight angle, you will bend the pins at a slight angle. But yeah, that's not too bad. There's obviously the bit of solder. You can sometimes crimp the solder down a little bit, but you can also just drag the soldering iron over the tips. I'll show you. Yeah, you can sort of, you know, just heat the tip like that and do that and get any little blobs off the end if there are any. But yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, you obviously can get solder braid and stuff on there, but it's, you know, it's a question of how long do you want to spend getting these perfect. What I have been doing is I've been testing on the 2000 board there you saw me repair in a previous video, sticking this socket into the socket, so that as I'm sticking these, you know, ones with bits of solder that might damage the socket, I'm only going to be damaging this socket. Occasionally one of the pins will come out and I have to stick it back in when I do the next chip, but it's just a good way of avoiding damaging the socket that's already on the motherboard whilst I'm testing legs like this that have got little bits of solder and stuff that I'm not prepared to, at this point in time, spend ages cleaning off. So let's test that first chip. And again, I think it's okay. The first one is working. So how many bad chips did you think would be on that board? None whatsoever. So I've got all the original ones. We'll look at here, the sharp ones off the first board, and then we've got some of the Siemens one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hang on, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I've so far got 32 working DRAM chips off these first two boards. Not tested the TTL chips, but I took them off anyway, and yeah, I've got a resistor pack there I'll take off that. As I say, I'm going to try and reclaim as many of these caps as I can. I'm even going to take it off these bits of sockets here and pull out any of the nice silverish pins and keep the pins. It's always useful if you get another socket that's got dodgy, corroded pins. You can take the socket off and swap some of the pins out. You could just save you a bit of cost and stuff, and it's just a nice easy way of being able to fix a socket. So 2 more boards to go. I'm going to go as far as speculating that because these are Siemens chips as well, I reckon it's going to be the same thing. I think the seller has just basically destroyed these for no other reason than to make a few extra pounds from the RAM. He saw no value in the boards at the time. He sold the chips off separately. Look at the state of that cap there, it's crushed, absolutely crushed. Yeah, it makes me sick, it really does. I can't even use the socket on that one because the expansion socket's cut down, but I think that one's a full-size one. But anyway, nevertheless, I'll reclaim what I can off these. I mean, I wouldn't reclaim the electrolytics, there's no point. So I've speeded up the process somewhat here. I'm cutting some corners. I've removed 0 solder from underneath any of these chips, not even straightened the pins, because that's the time-consuming bit. And I thought, well, let's just try, because when you heat them up, the pins become a little bit more malleable because they're hot. So I figured that it would be able to just pull through without an issue, and that's the case. Yeah, I've removed these in a quarter of the time that I'd been spending on the first 2 boards. This one's nearly done, all 16 chips removed in about 15 minutes maybe. You need to spend about 30 or 40 seconds on each side. Heat the centre of the chip as well a little bit, because that helps just keep the temperature on the side you've already done. Hopefully we're nearly there. Those bottom pins might need a bit more. What I don't want to do is heat for too long and damage the chips. But I mean, so far we've had 32 of these. There we go, that's another one. 32 of these that have worked perfectly. So what's your guess about this board? These 16 chips, how many of these do you think will work? So much to my surprise, we do have a fault actually. I mean, I've not got it configured here correctly to show the chips properly. Let me just run that again a second time just to be sure. Yeah, so I'll run that one more time, but it does look like we have a fault in one of the chips here. Yeah, a specific address again. So yeah, 1 chip bad so far. So I'll show you how I'm testing it, because I'm not sure I've shown you, so I'll just plug the socket in, and I'm glad I've been doing it this way, because this socket is taking a lot of the brunt of the pressure, if you like, from the pins. As that chip goes in, I'll show you. When we take it out, 1 or 2 or more of the pins will come out with the chip if I'm not careful. But then I've got into a really fast routine, because obviously I've gone through these one by one, so I'm getting the keys on the keyboard now, 6, 8 and 9 ready. And as soon as it comes up, I press the button a few times to go through the keyboard test. Like that, 6, 8, 9. And just let that go through. Yeah, that one's alright. The board is stood off the carpet here, by the way, but the benefit of this and the beauty of this, that you can see the socket just pulls out because the pins are not super tightly gripping that socket, so you've got no wear from continuously sticking chips in and out of the thing. And then to get the chip out of here, I usually push this all the way through if I can to the other side. It's a bit stuck, so I'll try from the other side. So all the stress here is on the socket. Yeah, so you can see one of the pins is coming out there, so we'll just try and push that back in if we can. sometimes they will come out completely with the chip. In fact, I've got a load coming out here, look. There's like 4 on this side, so, but bear in mind this socket is pretty warm now. I don't think I would reuse this socket. So if the pin comes out, it's a case of carefully pushing it back in, and then just using the screwdriver here to carefully just push these back down again. As I say, you wouldn't be reusing this socket. I'll probably bin it after I've done here, but the reason these are coming out is because the bits of solder on the pins of the chips here, you know, I haven't spent ages cleaning each one up. I would clean them up on a need to clean up basis, if that makes sense. So I don't even need to throw away that socket. I took out the pins and retensioned them. I've shown you how to do that on another video. I might not have uploaded it yet. So the amazing thing is we've got all of these DRAMs off here, 63. It was the 60, it was like literally I think 4 from the last. I actually found a fault, and I double checked this right at the end, and there is a fault at the same address that was shown. But the amazing thing with that is, as I was counting these and getting to these last 6 or so here, I thought, oh, I'm going to have one more than I've got enough space for. I'm going to have to stick one on the other side, and it just so happens a minute later one of them failed. So yeah, I've got all that now as additional 41256 DRAM. Crazy. But what's even more crazy is, yeah, alright, one of these had a fault, but the other 3 didn't. The other 3, all the RAM was perfect. So to finish up here, and I won't bore you with this, but I'm just going to remove these other bits. I'll show you the bits I'm going to take off in a minute, you know, like connectors, caps. And as I say, I will be taking these off and just reclaiming some of the pins and sticking them into my spare pins bag, which are always useful. Sometimes you can buy brand new sockets and you'll find there's like 1 pin missing, and it's really annoying. I had that recently. I had a bunch of 42 pin sockets. I think 8 of them were okay. 2 of the sockets had a couple of pins missing in each, which really annoyed me. So in order to speed up the process here, I'm going to use the Dremel, because removing these caps, I want to show you. See if you look at this point here, ground. All of the ground around there, so you have to heat with an incredible amount of heat, and yeah, I can do it, but it takes like, I don't know, 5 minutes to get one cap off. It's ridiculous. Most people would just put this in the bin at this stage and go, I'll just buy replacement caps, but you know what, trying to get ones that, like I say, that look identical to this, the same package and style and everything, it's pretty hard. And when I'm replacing these from time to time on Amiga boards, I like to try and replace with the original ones if I can. So it's not going to take me a minute. I'm going to use the Dremel. I've got some safety goggles here, and I'm just going to Dremel across. Where are the caps now? I'm just going to Dremel across, say, here, like this, to cut all of the copper off that side, and then do the same all the way off that side. You know, in theory, you need to do the same on this side, but to be honest, once you've done one side, that's 50% of the heat gained, if you like. You know, you've got 50% less copper. So I find that the desolder super easy. I'll show you that. I'll be able to just get these off the desolder station, and it'll take a few seconds each to remove. So on the last one of these connectors here, this is a short connector because obviously the board's been chopped, but you know what, it's still useful. You can always replace part of a connector. It could also be used for other mods and things, for other projects. But yeah, once you've got all the solder off there, just do what I've shown a million times before. You know, grab 2 or 3 pins, pivot, and you can hear them snap off. They all snap off. And then you should get to this situation where, as you can see, it wobbles. Can you see that? And just wobble it backwards and forwards like this. I don't know, a good 20 or 30 times. Make sure all the pins are free. And then you should get to a point where you can start to lever it off, you know, just on one side like this, just a little bit, and then move it along a bit. Again, just lever a little bit, move along a bit. There you go, you can see it's coming off here now, I think. Yeah, you can see, you can get those off without any issue. There's only a few bits of solder. Thing is, there's no damage there. If this had been an actual motherboard, you can see, you know, that same technique can be used to swap these out, but I've now got 2 or 3 of these spare. So you've seen the 63 out of 64 RAM chips worked okay. I've got a few bits of sockets here. Most of the sockets have been twisted, so all the pins are bent, but I've managed to, you know, save some of the pins here. I'll stick that in my drawer with spare pins and odds and ends and stuff. They're probably single wipe sockets, these, so you probably wouldn't want to bother saving the pins from them anyway, really, but anyway, I've still got them. And I've got 3 3/4 of these expansion connectors here, lovely gold plated. You can see most of the caps I desoldered. It was about 20 or so that I just cut off. because you can always, you know, when you're on one where there's one broken on the board, you've still got the points there, so you could actually solder it on the top there, and as long as your solder's nice and tidy, you'd never know that it'd actually been, you know, cut off another board. So, but majority of them are actually desoldered, and they've got lots of resistor packs in there, some chips. I need to take them out. They shouldn't really be in this bag because they're going to suffer some ESD damage. But yeah, those are just like buffer chips, 373s and things like that, I think, maybe some 244s. But as you can see, pretty much everything is off these. I think we had one resistor pack there that broke. But yeah, all done with. Those can now go in for recycling.